Number one, the same scenario, and most importantly, the same energy dynamic underneath the scenario, the same feelings, the same emotional triggers are playing out before your very eyes once again. And it's familiar. You recognize it. Oh my goodness, I've been in a very similar circumstance with the very identical, pretty much, feelings like multiple times throughout my life. And when it happens, it can almost be a little bit unnerving because there's an intuition, there's like a sensing that, oh my goodness, this is like a lesson that for some reason I keep playing out. Why do I keep playing out? What's the message? I don't know it. All I know is I'm in it again, and usually it's not pleasant. These karmic cycles are there to kind of teach us and balance out energy. So it's rarely a desirable thing that, oh wow, this is awesome things here. It's the opposite, like some kind of challenging circumstance that here it is in your life again, playing out, same energy, same old song and dance. What do I do? Number two, I kind of already said, but it's important to note, and that is you recognize it as a reoccurring pattern, which even if it feels a little bit like precarious right now in your life, this is a good sign. This is like right there, a very telltale sign you are completing this karmic cycle, because it's no longer karma. It's like karma, the way I would describe it as best as I know, as I understand it, it's like 3D physicalized expressions, reflections of unconsciousness. So before, you would have these things happen to you and you weren't aware that it was a cycle. You weren't aware that there was some kind of lesson to be learned or something to be cleared or healed. You were just unconscious going through it, and now you look back and say, oh, that was my past. These things or this thing kept happening to me, but this time is different because you're like, whoa, it's a little bit like deja vu. I've been here before. I know how this ends. I don't like how it ends. What can I do differently? Because it's conscious, because you're conscious, you're asking that fundamentally game-changing question. How can I respond differently? I don't want to continue to repeat the cycle. So that, my friend, is huge. And if you're watching a video like this and you relate to this, then you can already rest assured that what's happening right now, it really is an opportunity to do it right this time and move on fully and permanently. Number three, you didn't respond as you would now prefer to in the past. You didn't respond consciously in the past, and that's why it's here. So it's common to have, I know I have these things in my life big time, that there's regret, there's guilt, there's really like, almost like disappointment, like, man, now I kind of know better. And it's sometimes painful to look back and see that your performance at this aspect of your life or during this cycle, it was not conscious, it was not maybe pure of heart or authentic or genuine. And then of course, it resulted in like an undesirable consequence, an undesirable result. So you might have like some regrets about how you performed in the past. And that's okay, because that's what we're living in right now. We're living in, like, people call this the Earth School, because it's like school. You know, I don't know about you, but in high school, I didn't just ace everything the first time. I was kind of, not even close. And it's okay, I still passed. I still made it out of high school, one way or another. And you can too. This is an Earth School. So if this is you, for one, in a moment here, I'm going to tell you why this is actually good, how the mistakes of your past are going to eventually serve you in the now. But most importantly, I've really learned to be a lot more patient with myself. I'm going to go on a tangent here, because I know a lot of you folks watching me are going through a spiritual awakening, and what does happen is you become awake to a lot of the mistakes you've made in the past. A lot of the mistakes you may you're still making, and now there's just all this awareness. Before you didn't know any better, now you know better, but there's like a momentum, and sometimes you can really just be very disappointed with yourself But what I've learned is like we are in, again, it's like a school. And as long as you try your best and strive to do better next time, that's all you can ask of yourself. And it just doesn't serve us to beat ourselves up, because we deserve the opportunity to make mistakes and learn, just as every other semi-conscious, is what all we are at this point, human being on the planet. So if that's you and you're really beating yourself up over the past, please don't. It doesn't make any sense. Who are you to be special and not allowed the same lenience of being allowed to make a mistake? We all make mistakes. We all deserve to make mistakes. And all we can do is our best and move on from there. Number 4, very importantly, your mistakes have taught you something. A lot of times, the mistakes, the unconscious engagement with past karmic cycles have taught us what not to do. They've taught us consequences of acting or behaving in a certain way or unconsciously. One of my karmic patterns has to do with relationships and over giving and being like overly nice to a person, and then eventually waking up to that, and then I stop doing that. I stop basically over delivering, over giving, and the person has been very offended. Their feelings were hurt. They didn't understand. To them, I was just this jerk who didn't care about them anymore. And it has ended two important relationships to me have ended because of that exact energy dynamic. Most importantly, what would happen is they would have an extremely strong reaction where they were heavily triggered, and they projected onto me, and I was unable to withstand the storm. And I got sucked into this like ego battle with 2 different people at 2 different scenarios. And both of us just said things that we didn't mean out of the heat of the moment. And it was enough damage was done to where both relationships are now completely out of my life. And I've reached out many times to try to like mend them. And the point is, that taught me something. That taught me that, Victor, you cannot afford to go into this kind of ego battle with anybody, especially people you love. You have to find a way to separate yourself from the heat of the moment and come back into your heart. Because both times what would happen is we'd have these heated exchanges, and then we both felt justified in our perspective. We both felt right, but we were issuing damaging blows to one another, to people that loved each other. And then I would always, go away after the exchange, and I'd meditate, or I'd be sitting there, and I'd like drop back out of my head, out of my anger, and into my heart. And then from there, I'd realize, God, what have I done? How could I have let it come to this? How could I have said those things? And I'd come to this place of realization, and I'd reach back out and I'd say, listen, we're friends. We love each other. We can't do this. But by that time, both times for me anyway, they didn't see it that way. I believe they're both still angry with me. And I was able to let go of the anger and want to forgive, but it was too late, and I'm not blaming them. The point is, I learned the lesson that if I don't keep my cool, if I don't refrain from saying things out of anger, then I could lose people that are very dear to me, and I have lost them, and that's a real thing I have to live with. And I can get all sore about it and upset about it, but I learned the importance of having a sweet tongue with people you love. That's my lesson anyway. And not too long ago, I found myself in the same dynamic, and I was able to reflect on the mistakes in my past and do it differently this time. And that's the point of how we learn from our mistakes. Number 5, again, if you're watching this, you're probably like in the middle of something like this, or recently have gone through something, or maybe will. Maybe this will prime you to attract some kind of karmic completion cycle, who knows? But the main thing here is that the energy and the feelings are the same. The people will change. You may have noticed that. You may have noticed that you're able to attract people with a very similar personality type that just perfectly triggers something in you. So that's the main thing to recognize about a karmic cycle, because not everything is a karmic cycle, at least in my opinion. A lot of it's just general life stuff. But there are these sort of, I think, lessons our soul come intending to learn and sort of master and overcome, and you know it by the energy, the emotions evoked in you, the energy dynamic will be the same, even if the players and the landscape has changed a bit. Number 6, because of everything I said, because you've learned from your mistakes, because you recognize it as an opportunity, which is exactly what it is, to do it differently this time, and you are now conscious, you make a different choice. Naturally, not because I'm saying so in this video, but you will find yourself naturally making a different choice. And that's what happened to me as I explained that dynamic recently. I found myself in a very identical situation where I had been over-delivering on something. I had to tell them, I knew they weren't going to like it. And as suspected, because I kind of like saw this coming as it was beginning in a way, I was like, wow, I feel like I'm stepping into this sort of karmic pattern again. Sure enough, they were triggered. And they said stuff to me that was triggering, that made me feel justified to fire back. But because of my past mistakes, because I've learned the hard way, the detriment of firing back, I didn't fire back, even though I wanted to, even though that energy was the same, I didn't. I was like, Victor, you gotta cool off first. So I went right there, you can't see it obviously, it's a little meditation cushion, and I sat there and I grabbed one of my wife's like million singing bowls, and I sat there and I played the singing bowl. And what happened within like a minute is a memory of me and this person just came into my mind very organically, and it was a very heartfelt memory. And I realized like how much I love this person and how much I know they love me, and just how many beautiful experiences we shared, and I refused in that moment to let it go down that way. So instead of reacting like I have in the past, I responded. I centered myself, and then I sent a little message to them from that centeredness, and then I didn't know what was going to happen. At that point, I knew it was a karmic cycle. I was going through it again, and I knew I learned and I did something differently, but I didn't know how it was going to go. I didn't know how I was going to go, but I made a different choice. Number 7, you know you've completed something when there's a different outcome. There was for me in this particular situation, there was a different outcome. I waited, praying to God. This person would have been responsive to my new strategy, my new attempt. And a few hours later, they called me up, or they sent me a nice voice note, and they were in tears. And it was just I was so relieved. I was like, I cannot lose another relationship to this same darn scenario. But because of everything I said, because I learned the lesson, responded differently, which when you're conscious, when you own your mistakes and don't let them define you, we have a little freedom, a little space, a little wiggle room to respond differently. And I did, and thank goodness, there was a very different outcome. And I can't say for sure this is never going to come up again, but even if it does, now I know how to handle it. I'm not really going to be afraid of it necessarily. And I'll leave you with this, my friend. If you're already going through this and you know what I'm talking about, but I can tell you from my own experience, from this particular situation I shared, as well as ones from the past, that the feeling or the recognition that you learned the lesson, you completed the karma, esoteric concepts aside, but like you rose to the occasion and you learned from your mistakes, the witnessing of yourself doing that, it's so priceless. And the feeling of knowing that this cycle is finally complete, it makes it all worth it. And the lesson we learn, we get to carry with us, not just for the rest of our life, which is a long time, hopefully for most of us, but for lifetimes, for our soul. These are soul, our eternal souls fragment themselves into this earth situation to learn lessons, not just for this little fleeting life of ours, but for the journey of our soul, for the eternal, ever-expanding light and wisdom of our unique soul signature. So it's not an easy road. And these scenarios may have been played out for many lifetimes, whether we know about them or not. This time in human history is a time of completion. It's a time of doing it better this time around, because we've been blessed to be alive at a time when the planet is going through an awakening, an ascension, and our consciousness is expanded. And all of a sudden we're able to like see all this. We're able to see how we tick, see our mistakes, sort of sense into our karma and make new choices, and then therefore create a new reality, a new, brighter future.